All right. Okay, so welcome to the PatternFly Demo. If you're new to this conversation, we welcome any feedback with the design, and I will post the recording from today on YouTube after the fact, so it's always watchable if you need to drop a little bit earlier. We can go ahead and take a look at the agenda if I'll open that up, and we can start today with interaction design and Stacy on PF4 website content.
Okay, hi guys, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great, okay, I'm gonna just share my screen. And in the agenda, I linked to this content overview for PF4. So today we're gonna be taking a look at a few different copy docs. The first will be the homepage content and then getting started content that I've been working on. So for the homepage, we did a rev earlier in the year or later in last year, you know what I mean, earlier. And we got some feedback from testing. So essentially what we really wanted to do is start off with kind of a general value prop statement. So what are you getting yourself into? And we're starting off with build better experiences with repeatable, scalable design. And then we wanted to make it clear that PatternFly is an open source design system. So that's what we start with. And one of the pieces of feedback we got from testing was that people weren't always aware of what a design system was. So it just added a little bit more information, built to drive consistency and unify teams, and then a little bit more information about what we provide. So design documentation, components, code examples. So this is the new rev of just the overview statement of what PatternFly is. And then meet PatternFly. So this is just very brief overview of what we provide. So guidance with our guidelines and with our styles. Just basically a general overview of the different pieces of PatternFly at a very high level. So introducing components, layouts, and demos. And then why PatternFly 4? So this is just a few of the value props that we kind of distilled. So it's modular and flexible, accessible, and built for teams built to scale, and just a very short, simple kind of overview statement that explains what the benefits are of PatternFly 4. And then, so from this homepage, and you guys can see a little bit more, I know when Joachim presents what we've been doing with the website, I know it's kind of hard to see with just the copy, but we'll have a getting started section. And I think the biggest struggle that I had with getting started was kind of trying to figure out how to write content that explained what everything was without awkwardly repeating myself while writing for a lot of different audiences. So with this getting started section, this is very focused on consumers of PatternFly. So taking contributors completely off the table for now. We're going to put that content and getting started with contributing in a completely different section. This is really just about, I'm a consumer of PatternFly. I'm coming here for the first time. I want to understand what this thing is, and I want to understand how to get started very quickly with it. So I pulled about PatternFly 4 into its own section where I go a little bit deeper into detail about the structure of PatternFly, so layouts and components, our style and designs and guidelines, and then our additional tools. So what's a demo, what's a utility, and what are variables and how do you use them? So this is meant to be a general overview that both designers and developers can benefit from. And then we have two sections, getting started for designers and getting started for developers. So for designers, again, we're introducing these parts of the system, but from a design perspective. So if I'm a designer and I've skipped over all the other stuff we just went through and I just come right here, what do I care about? What am I looking for? And then, so just introducing again all the components with the eye for designers, and then explaining how to download and install the PatternFly 4 design kit. And then for developers, we've got this broken out into two sections, one for core devs and one for React devs. And they both follow a completely different kind of getting started procedure. So for core, you're installing the system. We're explaining what all is involved in installation, what you get when you install, how to configure your project, and how to use styles. And for React, it's it's similar, but you're getting started in a different way. So if you already have a project, you can just install PatternFly and see some configuration examples. So we have some examples for Webpack, for Babel, and we don't have one for TypeScript yet, but I think that that's in plan. And if you don't have a project and you need some way to get started very quickly, we have instructions for how you can get started with the PatternFly React seed. And all this content is also in an MD file, and it's in PatternFly.org. You can access this content from the content overview doc. If you have any suggestions, anything that you think could be improved upon, any feedback, I'm definitely interested in it. So yeah, any questions? Cool, that's all for me.
Great, thank you, Stacy. And Gina with PF4 search page and term mapping.
Thanks, Rachel. I'm going to share my screen, and I've been working on the search feature for the new site. And so the first thing that I did, the first thing I did was this component mapping. So I kind of just started with all of the components that we have for PF4 currently that are implemented and map them back to the PF3 patterns that we have, so that all the names will, when they search, if someone came in and searched for a component that was in PF3, now they can map to the PF4. And so with that, we're going to use Algolia for the search feature on the site. So this is Bootstraps. They use it as well. But when you type in whatever it is, like content, it separates it by category, which is what we wanted to do for the site as well. So I just created some like initial wireframes of what it would look like. And the design for this isn't finalized either, because we just started using some new visual designers. So this is just my take on it. But my thought was that this search would be on the left side because it would be dependent on the toggle that we have here. So if you're searching for something in HTML, it would filter it without the user knowing. And then same with React. And this would be something of how it would show up. My thought here was, and obviously this isn't everything that would show up if you typed in background, but originally I was thinking of putting badges here just to make it super clear that those are HTML components versus React. But I don't really know if we need that or not, considering you can see the toggle above. But yeah. So if anybody has any feedback, I'd love to hear about that. But that's my initial thoughts on the feature. Stop sharing.
Okay, great. Thank you, Gina. Any questions? All right. All right, Michael, on our color charting system.
Hey. So we've been doing a lot of work on charting lately in charts, and it came to be the time where we have to figure out how we use color. And specifically, the charting system that we're using is called Victory. You can remember that because you'll be victorious if you use PatternFly. It has this kind of color order logic where basically we can give a set number of colors in a specific order that it will use. So that's kind of what prompted this idea of this kind of color logic system. And to kind of get started, I just wanted to go through, we've got all of our colors. We've got 6 colors, each with 5 steps. And these are these started out as our chart colors, but we actually added them in as global color variables. And this kind of particular order that you see is kind of the order that we decided to go with. And it's mainly just kind of based on what felt good. For example, we're starting with blue because blue is our primary color most of the time. So start with blue. I went to cyan first, but blue and cyan were a little too close, so I put the green in there. just decisions like that. But that's not really the focus. But it is good to note that there is a specific order of those colors. So starting out, I kind of want to break it down into kind of how, I guess I'll kind of tell you guys how I broke it down. And so I started by kind of going with this system of sort of a parent-child, or like a first level, second level approach. So for the first level, we basically just go through our base colors. So base colors are the middle colors here that you can see highlighted. And if we've just got, just parent level objects, we just use those base colors for now. And that's pretty much it. But what if you've got that second level, or kind of a parent-child sort of thing going on? That's where we bring in the secondary colors. And because we were working with that system where there's an order of colors that we have to give, I wanted to kind of go about that order in a more thoughtful and considerate way. So because accessibility is a big thing with PatternFly, I thought kind of going for contrast and a higher contrast between those colors would be a good idea. So what you see here is each kind of parent level object has the base color, but then it's got their secondary colors, and they go in a specific order each time. So we start with the base color because we always start with the base color because it's the best. But then we go straight to the lightest color for the second value, and then we go to the darkest, and then we come back to the second lightest and the second darkest. And I didn't have the second darkest in here on accident, but it would be at the end. So that's basically the idea of the whole system, is that we're jumping from lightest to darkest after the base color. And the whole idea is that we never have two colors that are next to each other on the kind of palette spread here be next to each other on the graph, just for that extra boost of contrast. We're not going for any specific contrast values because we do have this set limitation, this limited set of colors. So it'd be almost virtually impossible to try to reach a certain number of contrast ratio, but we are trying to just give a little bit of boost in the contrast, and that's kind of the goal here. So basically, just to expand on that, if you get through all the first level colors, or all of the colors in our palette, it just kind of loops and syncs. So you can see the November and the May are pretty far apart to the point where it's not a huge deal that they're the same color. But what if you have a whole bunch of first level objects? So this is where the system really kind of expands into its full, I guess, like nature. And it is the exact same logic that I just showed, except it goes through each color in the color set. So I have this kind of visual to show you guys because it's a lot easier to show than it is to explain. But basically, we start with our base colors for the first 6 values. We always start with our base colors because, again, they just look the best, and they were kind of what every color was based on. So every other color was based on. So they were kind of designed to be a set. But then what we do is we start alternating from lightest to darkest, but for each color. So we'll come back up to the top and we'll go light blue, and then the darkest green, and then the lightest cyan, and then the darkest purple. And then when we get to the bottom, we just come back up to the top and flip it. And we're always going in that order of blue, green, cyan, purple, gold, orange. So what this allows us to do is always have a different color. We never have 2 of the same colors next to each other, but we always have some contrast because we're going from lightest to darkest. And then if you still need more colors, we come to the second lightest and second darkest and, go through that, and then we flip it again, and that's pretty much it. So as you can see, it kind of creates this nice, it looks pretty random, but it's not, which I think is kind of nice because it's sort of a random with a benefit of having that kind of boost in contrast for the colors. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So I guess final notes, we kind of wanted, design this based on that idea of there being this order of colors that we have to provide, and kind of how's the most thoughtful way we could, create that order. I'm sure there might be times where, the color sets would want to be, the colors might want to be associated with certain values or ranges. So as the value goes up, the color gets darker. But we kind of wanted to just get this kind of basic foundation out of the way of kind of always having this system underlying everything before we start adding that logic. Yeah, that's it. Does anyone have any questions? Cool. Thanks, everyone.
I see some love it comments, so it's getting some good feedback there. Anything else, you guys? All right. Moving on to CSS, Matt Carlton with App Launcher, Alerts, and Login.
Hey guys. All right. Share. Can you see this? Is this big enough?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so real quick, alerts have been updated. Not really, there's not a major visual change here, but if you compare to what they were before, you might see some slight differences. But a big part of this was actually just rebuilding these so we could have them flexible enough to be both a toast notification and an inline alert. And this was related to some of the work that Andy did around the alert group as well. And we also had made some adjustments here to make these a little bit more accessible. One thing we do have an issue open for now that's going to be worked on in the near future is some accessibility stuff around just how screen readers interpret alerts when they have a dismiss button or different roles on the actual group. So we're still working through those things, but they're in a really solid place now and good for beta. And then the next thing is the app launcher. So if you've seen the app launcher in PF3, this is a very similar concept. Right now, what we offer in the app launcher in PF4 is just a simple list. But the reason this is a component, because otherwise this is just a drop-down menu essentially, but we're going to be expanding this to add the grid of like icons and text in there in the future. So we wanted to create a unique component just so it's flexible enough to do that. So you'll see that get added eventually as well. And then the last thing is just the new login. So you can see if you remember what the old login looks like. This is slightly different. This isn't quite finished yet. I'm just working on finishing this up today, but we've made some changes in design and accessibility stuff for the new login. So this is looking really solid on the design side. So we're just finishing this up on the CSS side, and this will be in for beta too by the end of the week. So that's it. Anybody have any questions? Cool. All right. Thanks.
Thanks, Matt. And Christy with data table refinements, list component, login footer, progress without description.
Thanks, Rachel. So some of these changes I've been working on were before break, before I went on PTO, and then the last few days I've been back. So I just wanted to share updates with the compound expansion on the table, mainly just to mobile. We had some nice visual changes from Mary, which I updated. So this is desktop and this is mobile. And on mobile, for this preview, I added a gray background to show that this is how the rows are separated on mobile. So this is just a margin between them. They kind of look like cards. So that's like that. And then when we have a row that's expanded, it'll look like this, and it's scrollable just because we gave it a height so that we didn't want to overload the user on mobile with too much information. That scrolls like that. And then again, if I was to click on pull request, I'd click on it, and then it would update this information here in the expandable row. And then Gina made some nice visual updates to the sortable headers we have here. So currently they look like this, and these icons are pretty inconsistent, but now it looks really good. So this is the non-selected state. So it looks like this, and if I hover over it, the icon goes a darker gray. And when I click on this, when this is in the selected state, it's either ascending or descending. So it's currently ascending. And the idea is that in React, I would click on this, and it would change to descending, and it would sort the table by the descender, by descending, and then I would click again and it would go ascending. And then if I wanted to select on like branches or pull requests, it would unselect from repositories. So it's always going to be sorted by one of these headers. So those are the changes there. This PR is still up for review. So if anyone wants to make any more comments, that would be great. And then the list. So Michael Coker and I worked on this. So before, the list component was kind of like a makeshift list. But now we've taken what we originally had in content for list. So here and here, and we've added it to the list component. People can use that now. This is an unordered list, an ordered list, and we also have an inline version. And the list can be nested up to any depth, so you can continue to nest that. And then I know Matt just mentioned this with the login. This probably isn't up to date. This is something I did before break. But the login footer was using the list component that we got rid of and we changed it. So we had to redo the login footer. So maybe it's changed now, but this is what it looks like on desktop. And then when you scroll down to mobile, it just changes to its icons and the text is removed. The more sits down here. And the last thing is the progress component. So there was an issue created in React where the progress couldn't be used without, they wanted an example without the text up here. So they couldn't do that in React because there's a grid gap sitting in between them. So I created an example of the progress without removing the grid gap, but just using one row. So once this is merged, it should be good for React to go. And that's it.
Okay, great, Chris. Thank you, Christy. Any other questions on this one? All right. And Michael Coker.
Hey. Share my screen. Okay. The first thing is our new split button dropdown. This is a variation of the existing dropdown component, so you can find it there. This hasn't been merged yet, so this is only in the preview workspace, but it should be merged soon. And it's basically like an existing dropdown, except all of our dropdowns to date, the toggle button for the dropdown is the toggle for the menu. In the split button dropdown, we allow for interactive elements inside of the dropdown. So this checkbox, this is just a button. You could have 2 buttons, 3 buttons that would all perform different actions inside of a dropdown, and you can have a drop-down menu or drop-down menus. So that's in the works. Then the next one was an options menu. This is very similar to a drop-down as well. It's actually closer to a select component in that you select something and it holds an option. But the option that you select is not represented in the drop-down, so it's unlike a select in that regard. So you can have something like this with text in the drop-down toggle, or you could have just an icon or whatever, and you select something and it stores the state of selected item inside of the menu, and that's indicated by a check mark beside of the selected item or selected items. You can have multiple levels of selection groups inside of the menu. And this has not been merged yet either, but this and the previous feature are in for beta, so you should see them within the next week. Let's see, the next one was something that Matt Nolting had done the majority of the work on, but while he's out, I'm finishing this up so that we can get it in for beta. And it's basically just a Flexbox layout system. It's real generic. It's pretty basic. It just allows you to create, similar to utility classes, custom Flex layouts by using classes to denote Flex properties like justify, content, and align items values. So you can build all types of different Flex custom layouts just using classes. It's different from utility classes in that it doesn't use important, doesn't have as many options, doesn't have as many responsive options. It's a little bit more basic. And this actually would come with core, whereas our utility classes don't ship with core by default. That's an additional style sheet, so this is something that would be built into the system that anyone could use. The next thing was, hopefully I have this up. Oh no, we removed something from the workspace recently, so sorry about this, but we have a bunch of icons from PatternFly 3 that we're going to persist into PatternFly 4. And so we use Font Awesome and this list of PatternFly 3 icons inside of PatternFly 4. Previously, the PatternFly 3 icons we didn't have available to use in core other than inline SVGs, like just SVG files in the file system. Font Awesome we use an icon font for, so I just built an icon font out of the PatternFly 3 icons. And you would normally see a list of icons here, but we've taken that out briefly just for some unrelated issue. And you can see this by going to, this has actually already been merged into the system, so you can go to PatternFly or pfnext.com, and there's a link for icons in the upper right corner, and it'll list the icons and the classes to use if you want to use one of those icons. The next is our toolbar component. We used to have a toolbar layout that was really generic. It was similar to what I just demonstrated with the Flex layout, in that it was basically just a Flex row that allowed you to create classes that created space between and grouped items together. Well, we have an actual toolbar component that's very specific, where we have filter actions, pagination, etc. And so this is going to become a component. This is something that I have in the works. It's not really in a state that I can demo just yet, but it's another item for beta, so you should see it in the next week or so. And these are the designs for it, and so this is basically what I'm building it off of and what it will ultimately look like. And the next item is pagination. You can see it here actually in these designs. It's a component that would live inside of a toolbar in the top of the screen, and then at the bottom of the screen, or at the bottom of your paginated section of the page, you would also have a pagination that you can see along the bottom of the screen as well. And you can see that component. It's still in progress, but basically just what you saw in the design there. That's right here. And that's currently in progress and should be released with beta as well. And that's it.
Great. Thank you, Michael. Any questions? All right. Michael Spaxman on browser support.
Hello. Just get screen share going. So yeah, we've been doing some work with browser support. Some of you may know that we decided to drop IE 11 a little while back, primarily because of its inability to handle custom CSS custom properties and CSS grid, which are two pretty important features that we use quite a bit throughout PatternFly. Obviously, there's a lot of people that need IE 11, so we wanted to see what we could do to offer some support for that. So we went on a mission to make this happen. We've made a lot of progress. We have pretty much a working solution. It's not finished. There's some things that we're kind of going through, but wanted to just share this issue. I'll paste it in the chat here. Basically, that's the bulk of the work. And so what this kind of amounts to, well, let me just back up actually. If you were to try and use PatternFly in IE 11, you'd see something like this. Doesn't get you very far. But it's really not that far gone. It's really just a matter of making sure that the variables get processed and the grid related properties, have some sensible fallback values. So in this pull request that I just posted, there's some scripts in there that basically do a bit of post processing on the core side. So we'll do a normal build, and then we go at the end and we further post process all of the individual component style sheets, so that there is, in addition to the typical style sheet you've consumed in the past, there's an IE 11 version of that sitting right there in the directory alongside those style sheets. So you can just use those. That'll get you pretty far. It doesn't stop there. So basically, there's a script that users will need to kind of craft to take it the rest of the way. I'm working on a guide for how to do this, but just to kind of give you an idea of what it will do for you is it'll basically take you from a view that looks like this to a view that looks like this. So, big success. I would show it to you live right now, but I've managed to break it this morning doing some work. I think I'm actually to blame for Michael Coker's font icons not working at the moment, so sorry about that. But in any case, yeah, it's coming along quite well. There are some known limitations around what grid definitions you can use. There's certain like keywords that you won't be able to use, like repeat. But so basically, as we're going through and just trying to offer up a page layout and kind of identify what properties would need to be overridden, and what are some sensible, values to put in place of those. So once we have all of this kind of put together, I imagine we'll post, on a blog or something, or maybe add it as part of the docs. But in any case, there will be the ability to support IE11. It just means, there might be a little bit of extra work to make sure that all of the CSS properties that will run in IE11, are added to your style sheet. So that is the bulk of it. Is there anything else? No, I think that's it. If anyone has questions, I'd be happy to answer those now.
Hey, Michael.
Hey.
Just one thing. First off, thanks for doing this. This is really huge for us. Let me ask if you can make this definitive statement that IE11 will be supported with PatternFly 4. Is that correct?
There absolutely will be, yes, support for it. It will not be out of the box like support where you don't have to do anything, where you could just like import it and it will just work without any further steps. But yes, there will absolutely be support. There'll be a script that you need to craft on your consuming applications, and that'll basically just collect all the style sheets you want. It'll run through the same post-processing utility that we're using in core, and that will produce the style sheet to be served up with your application. So yes.
Will I need to do that at runtime, or how will that work? Would that be a pre-process that I
Yeah. So it's
my app, or what?
it would be a pre-processing step for you. Yeah, absolutely. So you'd get the distribution files from Patternfly. You'd basically run them through. It's basically a node script. I was going to halfway avoid getting into the meat of it, but I think I could show it to you really quick. You're going to write something about like this. It's less than 30 lines here in core. I'm testing it out in the Patternfly seed project. I've got the script it's less than 60 lines of code. It's a little bit longer because you need to go and fetch the Patternfly style sheets and then merge them with your app style sheets. But it's not a significant amount of work. It's not tied to any specific build system. So if you guys are using System.js or
which we
whatever,
are, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
That's kind of why we wanted to make this build agnostic. It's just
Yes.
it's a basic node script. So you run it, you can kind of choose at what point in your build process you want to add it in. It could be at the very tail end of everything. You could add it at the beginning. It depends on are you guys like doing development in Internet Explorer, or are you developing in Chrome and you just need it to work in Internet Explorer? So there's some flexibility there.
Great. That's great news. Thanks so much.
So yeah, cool. And I will definitely, like I said, once we get the blog post together or wherever we're going to put all of this information, there'll be a nice guide. I've got a couple of iterations on it that I'm working through now, and I'm having a couple of people go through and make sure that these steps are reproducible before I, call it a day. So.
All right. Fantastic.
So. All right. If anyone else has any questions, I can take those. Otherwise, we can give it back.
All right, thanks so much, Michael. And Ian, on the React side with night mode, theme toggle, and chip component.
Hey guys, bear with me. I'm trying to share my screen here. All right. Okay, so for the night mode, the idea was just to implement what the core developers are already or have already implemented over on the core side, which is basically to add the functionality to show a preview of what a dark theme would look like. So added that over on the React side here. So yeah, that's still, I think, in development on the core side, but that's what we've got so far. And for the chip, I figured the chip itself would be rather boring to demo, so I'm going to show a little bit of the chip group also that is not yet in production, but will be soon. The chip here, you can see it's got some basic labels here with buttons that allow you to close the label, and this longer chip has a tooltip attached to it that will show on longer text segments there. And for the chip group, got there's a few different use cases for chip groups. One of them is for filtering, and I think that's kind of the idea around this first example. The toolbar style chip group will give you customizable categories with chips embedded within the categories, and there's an expand button that will actually allow you to expand the elements that are hidden due to their longer content size. And right now you can see that this is currently working. So if the end user were to actually have some sort of logic tied up to remove an actual category, then it would be reflected in the button text here. Didn't really know how deep to go on custom functionality like that, and how much to leave to the end user, but I guess that's a discussion that we're still having. And if you remove the last overflow, then the button goes away. And yeah, I think that's all I have to show. Any questions?
Okay, thank you, Ian. And Yakum on Gatsby 2, core build, and the website work.
Yes, hi. Can you see my browser? Gatsby V2.
We can.
Okay, great. So first up, over in React, we also finally got our documentation upgraded to Gatsby version 2. So here's the PR, and I got help from Micro on this as well, especially when it came to a flash of unstyled content issue that we were seeing. And if you go to our documentation, PatternFly React source that should all not be running using Gatsby 2 and Webpack 4 under the hood. So I think there's a little bit of quirkiness left that will be ironed out soon, but it should be working pretty much the way that it used to before, just now with newer dependencies. And then over in core, so the next thing here, over in core, there was some slowness related to the build. So I root caused it back to the handlebars loader, taking a lot of time now. So made some improvements there, and according to some testing, the dev build went from like more than 2 minutes down to 12 seconds, and the production build went from like 3 minutes down to 42 seconds. So big speed improvement here for a build again. And as a bonus, when I was doing this, because I'm parsing partials differently now for handlebars, it's actually catching now errors with partials. So for example, we had some partials that did not exist before, and it actually catches those kinds of issues now. So there was a data list separator being used that didn't exist. I had to remove that. These form demo containers did not exist. I removed those, and then several examples used Alert Upgrade examples in like plural, which did not exist either, and had to rename it back down to example. So this is an added bonus. It should now catch these in the future. So if you add a partial that does not actually exist or it's misspelled, you should see it. Lastly, for the website work, I finally got the production build working. So now it's running up on patternfly.search.sh. And this is an early preview build. So finally now the building blocks are starting to come together, and then we can start to build on top of this, add more contents, add styling, whatever we need to do. But this is an early preview. So we've got our website up here, and you can see we're pulling in markdown files. So we've already got several markdown pages from Stacy and Matt Carano. So you can see here that we're starting to pull in some markdown files for content over in design guidelines. You can see we have some images, etc. So these things are starting to come together. And then for the documentation, we've got now the React and Core switcher properly working. So this is our React stuff, same as you see in our workspace documentation. And then if you switch over to Core, you get all of our Core components. Yeah, so good progress there, I think. And that's it from me. Thanks.
Just a question, Joachim, this is looking great. Is there a link to this that folks can just take a look on their own time and play around with?
Yes, and if you find any bugs, you can keep them. Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, you should see. I'm probably going to update this going forward, probably like at least like once every couple of days, as I start to improve this and make things work more and more.
All right, thank you, Joachim. Any other questions here? Okay, Katie with drop-down keyboard navigation.
Can I ask a quick question about the stuff Joachim was doing with the site?
Yeah.
Should I stop?
I'm just wondering when it would be like appropriate for people to start looking at that site and start giving feedback, because I don't want to like go through there and put together a bunch of stuff because I know it's still in progress, but I'd love to be a part of giving that feedback. So I'm just wondering what that timeline looks like.
Yeah, definitely. I would say probably starting like in the middle of this sprint or starting next sprint, because like the first 2 sprints, I was really focused on just getting the building blocks in and just having it like, you know, being built together. But now that I'm going to start focusing more on the design aspect of it, we can probably start to get more eyes on it, and functionality-wise that people have what they need. So yeah, just be on the lookout. I'm going to talk to Rachel about this, and then we'll communicate that out, and hopefully we can get more people to start looking sometime soon.
Cool. All right. Thanks.
Yeah, and I'll build on that by saying I think it depends too on what kind of feedback you want to give. Like I think if it's content specific, if there are things you're seeing in the process right now that you want to make sure are heard out and included in the website design, now might be a good time. But anything visual design related, or even anything related to, I would say, the functionality of what we have now, I think all of that is subject to be polished up.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought. I figured still want some time to finish polishing all that stuff before we start getting feedback.
Great, yeah, and I can keep you up to date, Matt, a little bit too about when our visual designer comes on board and things like that, about how it's moving.
Okay, cool, thanks.
No problem. And Katie.
Cool. Can you see my drop-down screen?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. So this was a ticket that it initially started just with arrow key support, so up and down arrow key support for going through this menu, and kind of expanded to include all of the keyboard navigation for drop-down, trying to match the accessibility standards. So I guess the first thing you might notice here is that when you click open the drop-down menu, the first item is actually not focused in tab 2 by default. This was actually a different piece of feedback we had been getting from different teams saying it was a bit confusing that this link here would be grayed out even though you weren't actually hovered over it. So now it's a bit more consistent behavior for the hover and focus. And you can see that if I press space, the menu opens and the focus is actually highlighted on the link. And in addition to that, you can use your arrow keys to go up and down this list, including wrapping. If you press escape, you can close the menu. Enter will also open a menu. And if you also press enter, it will act as like a click for the buttons that you're selected. And kind of as part of this change where we were kind of talking with Jen, we were making it more standard towards the accessibility web standards. We got rid of the React focus trap. So actually, you can't tab through the menu anymore. Tabbing closes the menu and you just go on instead of actually tabbing into and staying into the menu. So you actually have to explicitly press space or enter to get into the menu.
For instance, when I get
and let's see here. I think that actually about covers it. You'll have to take my word that I'm actually pressing my menu buttons until you try it out for yourself.
So it's just that, like I said, I just wanted to have the speed.
Any questions?
Yes, like a little bit more time off of everybody's hands. But I feel like we could communicate.
Okay, thank you so much for all of you who presented, and we'll be back in 2 weeks for our next demo. Just to clarify with how our demo times work, and I apologize for any confusion yesterday, they rotate between 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. every 2 weeks to accommodate different time zones. So if you see that on your calendar in the future, that is correct. And the next time that we'll meet will be at 11 a.m. So I will talk with you all then, and be on the lookout for this link on YouTube in the PatternFly channel. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
See ya.
Bye-bye.